Space Marines are the scalpel, the Imperial Guard is the hammer, trillions of ordinary humans holding the line across a million worlds with lasguns, bayonets, and a faith in the Emperor that has to compensate for everything their bodies cannot. But not all guardsmen are the same. Here is every major Imperial Guard variant explained. Let's break this down. Cadian Shock Troops. They are the standard by which every other regiment in the Astra Militarum is measured, and the reason they are the standard is not because they are the most specialized or the most exotic. It is because they are the most disciplined, the most consistently effective, and the most widely deployed fighting force the Imperium has ever produced from a single world. Cadia sat at the mouth of the Eye of Terror for 10,000 years. Every generation of Cadians grew up knowing that the forces of chaos were one successful Black Crusade away from pouring through their front door. And that knowledge shaped an entire planet's culture into a military machine whose efficiency borders on genetic. Cadian children learned to field strip a lasgun before they learned to read. Cadian teenagers served in the planetary defense forces before they were eligible for guard service. By the time a Cadian shock trooper shipped out to fight in the wider Imperium, he had more training than most other regiments' veterans. The doctrine is combined arms, infantry advances under the support of heavy weapons teams, supported by Lehman Russ battle tanks and Chimera transports. The formations are tight, the fire discipline is immaculate, and the chain of command runs from the Lord Castellan down to the newest White Shield without a single link of ambiguity. Cadians do not improvise, they execute. They follow the plan because the plan was written by officers who grew up on the same firing ranges, and the plan works. In 99 and 99 Dawn M41, Cadia fell. Abaddon, the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, finally broke the planet itself, cracking its crust and rendering it uninhabitable. The Cadians who survived scattered across the galaxy, carrying their traditions, their discipline, and their fury into every war zone the Imperium needed them. Their last commander, Ursarkar E. Creed, said the words that define the regiment's legacy: the planet broke before the Guard did. On the tabletop, Cadians are the default Imperial Guard infantry. Their plastic kit is the most accessible entry point into the faction, and their aesthetic olive-drab fatigues, flak armor, and the distinctive Cadian pattern helmet has become so iconic that dozens of other fictional regiments copy it wholesale. The Cadians are not flashy, they are not exotic, they are the baseline, and the baseline is terrifying when it shows up in sufficient numbers. If you are enjoying this so far, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment with the Imperial Guard regiment you would want to serve in. Let us get back into it. Catachan Jungle Fighters. Everything on their homeworld wants to kill them. That is not an exaggeration. Catachan is classified as a death world, a planet whose entire biosphere is actively hostile to human life. The flora produces acid, toxins, and biological traps that can dissolve a grown man in minutes. The fauna includes predators the size of main battle tanks, insects whose sting can kill a space marine, and camouflaged reptilian ambush hunters that have claimed entire platoons without a single shot being fired. The air itself carries spores that can colonize human lung tissue if inhaled without filtration. Simply surviving childhood on Catachan qualifies you as one of the toughest humans in the Imperium. The Catachan Jungle Fighters take that survival instinct and weaponize it. Their doctrine is guerrilla warfare. Ambush, infiltration, demolition, close quarters combat with the Catachan Fang, a massive knife that every fighter carries and that most prefer to the standard issue lasgun. Catachans do not fight in neat formations. They do not advance in disciplined lines. They move through terrain like predators, using cover, concealment, and an instinctive understanding of hostile environments that no amount of training can replicate because it was learned through a childhood spent trying not to be eaten. Their famous commanders include Colonel Iron Hand Straken, a man who has been rebuilt with augmetic replacements so many times that he is more machine than flesh, but still leads from the front with a shotgun and a power fist, and Sly Marbo, the one-man army, a solo operative so lethal that the community treats him as the Warhammer 40k equivalent of Rambo, John Wick, and a natural disaster rolled into one. The Catachan's aesthetic is deliberately muscular, bandana-wearing jungle warriors in sleeveless fatigues who look like they walked off the set of an action movie. They are the Guard's most physically intimidating infantry variant and the only regiment whose soldiers regularly look down on Space Marines for being soft. Death Corps of Krieg. They are born to die. That is not metaphor. The Death Corps of Krieg consider their own deaths a sacred obligation, a debt owed to the Emperor for the sin their homeworld committed when it rebelled against the Imperium during the Age of Apostasy. Krieg's civil war lasted 500 years and ended only when the Loyalist faction detonated atomic weapons across the planet's surface, rendering it a radioactive wasteland. The survivors, consumed by guilt, dedicated every subsequent generation to atoning through military service so absolute that personal survival is not merely deprioritized, it is irrelevant. A Death Corps soldier does not retreat. He does not surrender. He does not expect to return home because home is an irradiated ruin, and he does not deserve to return to it. He advances into the guns, into the trenches, into the teeth of the enemy's strongest defenses, and he dies there if that is what the Emperor requires, which it usually is because the Death Corps specialize in siege warfare, the bloodiest and most attritional form of combat the Imperium wages. Their aesthetic is unmistakable. Gas masks, trench coats, greatcoats, steel helmets reminiscent of World War I. The visual language is deliberate, evoking the Western Front, Verdun, the Somme, the industrialized slaughter of human beings in trenches that stretch across continents. The Death Corps fight the same way. Artillery bombardments measured in days. Infantry advances across no man's land into prepared kill zones. Cavalry charges with lances against fortified positions. The casualties are astronomical, and the Death Corps does not care because casualties are the point. Every Krieger who dies is one step closer to absolution for the sin of their world. On the tabletop, the Death Corps received a modern plastic kit that has made them one of the most popular Guard variants in the current era. Their aesthetic has captured the community's imagination in a way that transcends competitive play, and their lore, the guilt, the gas masks, the quiet willingness to walk into annihilation has made them arguably the most emotionally resonant regiment in the faction. Armageddon Steel Legion. They fight from inside their vehicles because the air outside will kill them. Armageddon is an industrial hive world whose atmosphere has been poisoned by millennia of manufacturing output, and the Steel Legion adapted by building their entire doctrine around mechanized warfare. Every squad rides a Chimera armored transport. Every advance is supported by Lehman Russ battle tanks. Every engagement begins with the Steel Legion's infantry dismounting at close range, firing a volley, and remounting before the enemy can organize a response. The doctrine is blitzkrieg, rapid mechanized assault designed to punch through defensive lines, exploit breaches, and keep moving before the enemy can consolidate. The Steel Legion does not dig in. It does not hold ground through static defense. It holds ground by making the enemy unable to stand on it, rolling forward with armor and infantry in constant coordination until the battlefield belongs to the treads of their chimeras. Their aesthetic mirrors their planet. Gas masks, sealed greatcoats, goggles, industrial functionality over ceremonial appearance. They look like workers going to a factory that happens to be a war zone. The Steel Legion's most famous engagement is the defense of Armageddon itself against Gazgakul Thrakaz Wag, a conflict so massive that it drew dozens of Guard regiments, multiple Space Marine chapters, and Titan legions to the planet's surface. The Steel Legion held the line through 3 successive wars for Armageddon, fighting the same Orc invasion across decades, and their mechanized doctrine proved devastatingly effective against an enemy whose primary tactic is to run at you in very large numbers. Tallarn Desert Raiders. They are ghosts in the sand. The Tallarn Desert Raiders are the Imperium's premier light infantry specialists, drawn from a desert world whose surface was rendered uninhabitable by a virus bomb during the Horus Heresy. The surviving population retreated underground, and over millennia, they developed a warrior culture built on speed, mobility, and the absolute refusal to fight on the enemy's terms. Tallarn doctrine is hit and run. Mounted infantry on fast vehicles sweep across open terrain, strike enemy supply lines and rear positions, and withdraw before a response can be organized. They do not hold objectives through attrition. They hold them by making it impossible for the enemy to maintain the logistics required to contest them. Cut the supply line and the army starves. Destroy the fuel depot and the armor stops. Assassinate the commander and the chain of command fractures. The Tallarn fight the war behind the war, the invisible campaign of interdiction and disruption that makes the visible campaign winnable. Their aesthetic draws from Middle Eastern and North African military traditions. Flowing robes over light armor, headscarves, and face wrappings that protect against sand and sun curved blades alongside standard issue lasguns. The visual language says Nomad, Raider, Survivor, and the tactical reality matches. The Tallarn do not build fortifications, they do not dig trenches. They move, they strike, they vanish, and they let the desert do the rest. The Desert Raiders are the Guard's answer to the question of what happens when you cannot outfight the enemy through direct engagement. You outthink them, you outlast them, and you make sure that every supply convoy they send through your territory arrives empty, late, or on fire. Valhallan Ice Warriors. They come from a world that froze. Valhalla is an ice world, a planet locked in perpetual winter where temperatures drop to levels that kill unprotected humans in minutes, and the population survives through a combination of subterranean habitation and sheer stubbornness. The Valhallan Ice Warriors carry that stubbornness into battle as a doctrine. They do not break. They do not rout. They do not abandon a position regardless of casualties, regardless of odds, regardless of the tactical logic that says withdrawal is the correct response. A Valhallan regiment will hold a trench until the last soldier is dead, and then the next regiment will move into the same trench and hold it again. Their doctrine is defensive attrition, the strategy of absorbing the enemy's offensive power through sheer refusal to leave, grinding down assault after assault until the attacker runs out of soldiers before the Valhallans run out of willingness to die. The aesthetic is Soviet: long greatcoats, fur hats, heavy boots, equipment designed for extreme cold operations. The visual parallel to the Red Army during the Eastern Front of World War II is deliberate, and the doctrinal parallel is just as intentional. The Valhallans fight the way the Soviets fought at Stalingrad. They accept losses that would shatter other regiments, and they call those losses acceptable because the position was held. Commissar Thiefas Kane, the Imperium's most reluctant hero, served extensively with Valhallan units, and his memoirs portray them as grimly cheerful soldiers whose morale operates on a scale that starts at stoic and ends at fatalistic. Mordian Iron Guard. They fight in parade formation. Not figuratively. The Mordian Iron Guard advance into combat in perfectly dressed ranks, uniforms pressed, boots polished, bayonets fixed, maintaining formation spacing under fire with a precision that would be suicidal for any regiment that did not have the discipline to pull it off. The Mordians do. Their homeworld exists in tidal lock, one face permanently turned toward its star, the other permanently facing the void. The inhabited zones exist on the Terminator line between light and darkness, and the constant twilight has produced a culture obsessed with order, discipline, and the visible demonstration of both. A Mordian soldier's uniform is his identity. The bright colors, the gold braid, the impeccable presentation are not vanity, they are doctrine. The Mordians believe that visible discipline is the most powerful weapon a human soldier possesses, and they prove it on the battlefield by walking into kill zones that would send other regiments diving for cover, maintaining formation, maintaining fire discipline, and maintaining the psychological composure that turns an advancing line of brightly colored soldiers into something that the enemy finds genuinely unnerving. Their volley fire is devastating. Each rank fires in sequence, creating a continuous wall of lasgun fire that does not pause, does not break, and does not stop until the commanding officer orders a ceasefire or every Mordian in the line is dead. The Iron Guard are the franchise's clearest homage to Napoleonic-era line infantry, transposed into the far future and given lace guns instead of muskets, and the fact that their doctrine works in a universe filled with bolters, plasma weapons, and orbital bombardment is a testament to how frightening perfect discipline can be. Vostroyan Firstborn. The name is a debt. During the Horus Heresy, when the Emperor called for soldiers and every world was expected to contribute, Vostroya refused. The planet's industrial output was deemed too valuable to spare workers for the front line, and the Vostroyans kept their men at the forge while other worlds bled. When the heresy ended and the Imperium remembered who had helped and who had not, Vostroya was marked with a shame that has defined every generation since. The penance is absolute. Every firstborn son of every Vostroyan family is conscripted into the Imperial Guard. No exceptions, no deferrals, no substitutions. The firstborn goes to war, and the family prays that he returns, knowing that the debt their ancestors incurred can only be repaid in blood across an eternity of service. The Vostroyan firstborn fight with antiquated but beautifully crafted war gear, ornate lasguns with wooden stocks and brass fittings, fur-lined greatcoats, tall hats, and equipment that looks like it belongs in a museum rather than a war zone. The aesthetic is Tsarist Russian military, imperial, and aristocratic, with a level of ornamentation that sets the Vostroyans apart from every other regiment in the Guard. Their doctrine combines range firepower with a stubborn refusal to yield ground, and their veterans carry relics of previous campaigns that connect each generation to the ones that came before. The Firstborn do not fight for glory, they fight because their ancestors did not, and that failure echoes through every bullet they fire. Elysian Drop Troops. They come from the sky. The Elysian Drop Troops are the Imperial Guard's premier airborne infantry, specializing in grav-chute insertions, rapid deployment, and operations behind enemy lines where resupply is impossible and extraction is unlikely. Elysia is a prosperous trading world whose wealth attracted pirates, raiders, and Xenos incursions with enough frequency that the planetary defense forces developed an entire military culture around rapid response airborne operations. Drop from altitude, secure the landing zone, neutralize the target, extract before the enemy can consolidate a response. The doctrine translates directly into Guard service. Elysian regiments deploy from Valkyrie airborne assault carriers, dropping into hot zones with grav chutes and fighting with the understanding that they are alone, unsupported, and expected to accomplish their objective before anyone arrives to help them. Their war gear reflects the doctrine. Light armor for mobility, specialist weapons for specific targets. No heavy armor support because Leman Russ tanks do not fit inside Valkyrie. The Elysians trade the Guard's traditional advantages, numbers, armor, artillery, for speed and precision, and the ability to appear behind the enemy's lines at the moment they are least prepared. They are the Guard's closest equivalent to special forces, and their casualties reflect the risk profile of units that are always outnumbered and always operating without backup. Tanith first and only. Their world is gone. Tanith was a forested world whose population was in the process of mustering its first ever Imperial Guard regiment when the forces of chaos attacked and destroyed the planet. Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt managed to evacuate approximately 3,000 soldiers before Tanith burned, and those 3,000 became the Tanith first and only, the first and last regiment Tanith would ever produce. Their doctrine is stealth and reconnaissance. The Tanith people grew up in dense forests that blocked sunlight and required an instinctive understanding of movement through concealment. That skill translated directly into military application. Tanith soldiers are expert scouts, snipers, and infiltrators who can move through terrain unseen and unheard by enemies who are actively looking for them. Their signature war gear is the straight silver, a distinctive combat knife carried by every Tanith soldier, and their signature ability is an almost supernatural capacity to disappear into their environment, using camo cloaks and natural fieldcraft to achieve a level of concealment that borders on the psychic. The Tanith First and Only are the protagonists of Dan Abnett's Gaunt's Ghosts novel series, one of the most beloved and longest-running fictional series in the Warhammer 40k universe, and their characterization in those novels has made them the most fully realized regiment in the franchise's lore. Every soldier has a name, a personality, a history, and an arc that spans multiple books and multiple campaigns. The Tanith are not just a regiment, they are characters, and their story is the story of what it means to fight for a home that no longer exists. Tempestus and Kasrkin. They are the best the Guard has to offer, and the distinction between the two is the distinction between institutional excellence and planetary tradition. Tempestus are the Militarium Tempestus, the Astra Militarum's dedicated special operations force, drawn from the Schola Progenium and trained to a standard that exceeds anything the regular Guard can produce. They wear carapace armor rather than flak. They carry hotshot lasguns rather than standard issue. They deploy via Taurox Prime or Valkyrie into the most dangerous environments the Imperium faces, and they are expected to succeed where standard guardsmen would be annihilated. Kasrkin are the Cadian equivalent, the elite shock troops of the Cadian Shock Troops, soldiers whose training begins on Cadia's Caesar fortresses, and whose equipment includes the Hellgun and full carapace armor identical to Scion loadouts. The difference is cultural. Scions are products of an institution, Kasrkin are products of a planet. A Scion's loyalty is to the Imperium in the abstract. A Kasrkin's loyalty is to Cadia, to the memory of standing watch over the Eye of Terror, to the tradition that produced soldiers good enough to defend humanity's most important fortress world for 10,000 years. On the tabletop, both variants fill the elite infantry role, providing the Guard with small, durable, high-output units that can punch above their weight class in a faction otherwise defined by large, fragile, low-output squads. They are the Guard's answer to the question of quality versus quantity, and the answer is that the Guard wants both. Attilan Rough Riders. They charge on horseback. In the 41st millennium, in a galaxy of plasma weapons and orbital bombardments and genetically engineered killing machines, the Attilan Rough Riders mount biological horses, lower explosive-tipped hunting lances, and charge directly at the enemy at full gallop. The concept sounds absurd, the execution is not. Attila is a feral world whose population lives in mounted nomadic tribes, and the horsemanship that defines their culture translates into a cavalry doctrine that is devastatingly effective against infantry formations that do not expect a wall of lances moving at 40 miles per hour to come crashing through their firing line. The hunting lance is a one-use weapon. It detonates on impact, delivering an explosive charge directly into the target at the combined momentum of horse and rider, and the force of that impact exceeds what most infantry armor is designed to withstand. After the lance is spent, the Rough Rider draws a saber or a las pistol and continues fighting as light cavalry, screening flanks, running down broken formations, and exploiting gaps in the enemy line. On the tabletop, Rough Riders have returned to the modern Astra Militarum range after a long absence, and their role as fast, hard-hitting melee units fills a gap that the Guard's infantry and armor cannot address. They are the Guard's only true cavalry, and their existence in a science fiction setting is one of the franchise's most beloved anachronisms, proof that in the grim darkness of the far future, a man on a horse with a pointy stick can still ruin someone's day. Penal Legions. They are the Imperium's expendable. Penal legions are not regiments in the traditional sense. They are formations composed entirely of criminals, deserters, heretics, and anyone else the Imperium considers too dangerous to release and too numerous to execute individually. They are given lasguns pointed at the enemy and told that survival is their pardon. If they refuse to advance, the commissar behind them will shoot them. If they retreat, the commissar behind them will shoot them. If they succeed and survive the engagement, their sentence is reduced, though reduced does not mean commuted, and another engagement will follow, and another after that. The most famous Penal Legion in the lore is the 13th Penal Legion, better known as the Last Chancers, a unit of condemned soldiers led by Colonel Schaefer on suicide missions so dangerous that they are functionally execution orders with a non-zero survival probability. The Last Chancer's membership rotates constantly because most members do not survive their first mission, and the ones who do are sent on progressively more impossible operations until the mathematics of attrition catch up with them. Penal Legions are the Guard's darkest reflection. Every other regiment on this list fights out of duty, or honor, or guilt, or tradition. Penal Legionnaires fight because the alternative is a bolt round in the back of the skull. Their courage is coerced. Their loyalty is enforced at gunpoint. And their contribution to the Imperium's wars is measured not in victories, but in enemy ammunition spent on targets the Imperium considers already dead. And that is every major variant of the Imperial Guard, from the disciplined perfection of Cadia to the condemned expendability of the Penal Legions. They share nothing except the lasgun and the aquila. Their homeworlds span the galaxy. Their cultures have nothing in common. Their doctrines contradict each other on every level, from formation spacing to the acceptable casualty rate for a successful operation. But the Imperium does not need them to agree. It needs them to fight. And fight they do, in their billions, across 1 million worlds, in a war that has lasted 10,000 years and shows no sign of ending. The Space Marines are the Emperor's angels. The Imperial Guard are his hammer. And the hammer does not need to be elegant. It needs to be heavy. And it needs to keep swinging, and it needs to never, ever stop.